And good morning and welcome. I'm Rick Singleton. I'm the provost here at Queen's College, and I am a facilitator. I can't say I'm the instructor, but the facilitator for this undertaking that we have at Queen's College now, a certificate in supervision for ministry. And it's an initiative that we brought about mainly because we see that there are many people who are doing a variety of our courses and programs across the province and beyond. And we at Queen's College want to make sure that we do provide good theological education for all of our students in any of our courses. But we're equally concerned, I can say, that we make sure that people who are preparing themselves for ministry of any sort, be it ordained or non-ordained, that they also have access to some spiritual formation, and that we have some things in place to make sure that people can get some guidance and supervision in the development of their pastoral skills and pastoral practice. And we also try to, as much as possible, do what we do at Queen's College and what we describe as a community-based, faith-based community of learning, where we come together and we're able to talk and discuss, debate, challenge, learn and grow with one another. And so the technologies that are available allow us to do that in different ways. The technologies have allowed us to offer courses, and we have many people who are doing courses. We all recognize that there are people who are feeling called to ministry, both ordained and non-ordained, later in life, some mid-career, some late career, some in early retirement, and they're discerning their place, and the church is discerning their place as well, and that's good. But then we move on from seeing that, and we realize, yeah, it's great to have distance models and online courses and those types of things as a way of doing courses, but courses are not enough. We also need to provide for other supports for people in their time of preparation and formation. And so the initiative that we have come up with now is to try and, I would say, build the confidence and the competence of people who are in ministry to offer some on the ground, we might say, in situ in parishes, to offer some of the guidance and support, both pastorally and spiritually, for students who may be going on further in ministry. So that's kind of where and how this program came about, and we're offering it in two models that we'll come to in a little bit more detail in a few moments. One is that it's, well, for anyone who does it over the fall and winter, it's a certificate in supervision for ministry. But some are doing it as a non-credit course, and some are doing it for credit. I want to say that we have other initiatives to try and reach out from Queen's College across the province and beyond. And we have a grant from the Anglican Foundation of Canada that makes it quite cost effective to be able to offer this program, because we had set up the technology, and we have fees and rates and what have you, and also we didn't want the tuition fee for the non-credit course to be prohibitive in any way. So that's a little bit of background on what we're doing and why we're doing it. Now let's take a few moments on who's doing it. And I should say about myself that I'm the provost here at Queen's College. I always said that I already said that I'm facilitating, and the reason why I mention that is that I will do some of the sessions, but I will also have others lead in their areas of expertise, but I will facilitate them doing it. Sometimes we call that delegation or facilitation, and some call it manipulation. But anyway, whatever it is, I'm looking forward to it in every regard. So let's go online. We have some people, and we want to welcome them. Andrew, we'll ask you to introduce yourself first, if you will, and you're arranged here alphabetically, likely by your first name. So Andrew, a bit of introduction to yourself. I'm glad to meet you.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. Andrew Home, we're in Bay Roberts right now, lead pastor there, part of the PAONL movement. And just this is my first course with Queens, actually. Just get my feet wet, I think.
Excellent. Good. I'm glad to have you.
Nice to meet you all.
Wonderful. Great, Andrew. Good. Brent?
I'm Brent Ham from the Diocese of Fredericton, and I'm just outside of Moncton in Riverview. And I'm the Archdeacon in this area, and much like Andrew, this is my first course through Queens, and pleased to be a part of it.
Great. We're glad to have you part of it. Welcome, Brent. Great. David?
Yes, I'm David Alston. I'm a deacon at St. Philip's and St. Andrew's churches in Moncton, a neighbor of Brent's. And again, this is my first course at Queen's, and I'm looking forward to participating. Thank you.
That's great to have you. Good. Welcome. Garvin? Okay, not sure if Garvin is there or not. Okay, yeah. We're not hearing you, Garvin. Probably have a technology problem with your mic, so we'll move on down to Gerald.
I'm Gerald Giles. I'm the rector of the parish of Gander Bay, Newfoundland, and I'm a graduate from Queens. But Rick, just let you know, I have to leave at 10:20 because of a medical appointment. Okay?
Sure. Yeah, no problem, Gerald. And as I say, the stuff is recorded. Few people have mentioned to me, sent me a note to say that they have to leave. So when someone is leaving, you'll hear a little ding that somebody is going. But it's kind of like Sunday morning, you see somebody leaving. It's not that they're objecting, or might not necessarily be that they're objecting to what you're saying or doing, just that they have something pressing that can't be delayed. So anyway, Gerald, great to have you back with us, bud. Gloria?
I am Gloria Window. I'm rector of the Anglican parish in Heart's Content, Trinity Bay, Newfoundland. And I'm also a graduate of Queen's College 6 years ago, and this is my second parish, and wonderful that I can take part in this course. Thank you so much, Queen's College.
Great to have you, Gloria. Great to have you back with us. Garvin, we'll see if we can pick you up now. I'm not getting Garvin for some reason. Must be a problem with the mic or something there, Garvin. We'll step on to James, one of our recent graduates and soon to be ordained. James. Okay, not getting you either, James. Not getting your audio. I'm sure that you'll be able to straighten that out. James was always my go-to person. First, when we started offering a webinar, he was in Gander, did most of the courses online.
Can you hear me now?
I got you now, James. I knew you wouldn't be stalled very long. You might give a tip to Garvin and to any of the rest of us that if there's times that you're trying.
If you have more than one microphone, you got to select the right one.
Okay, there you go. So
a lot of computers have more than one mic that you don't know about.
Yeah. So you might go under audio, Garvin, and just click on that arrow button there, and it might show you that you got a couple of microphones. Make sure you got the right one turned on. Great, James.
I'm James Spencer. As Rick said, I'm a recent graduate of Queen's. I'm the rector in the parish of Buren, and I'm going to be priested in mid-October. Thank you.
Great. Good to have you. Great. Are we able to get you now, Garvin? No, we don't have you. Okay, Jolene.
I'm Jolene Peters. I'm the rector of St. John the Evangelist in Topsail, Conception Bay South, and I'm a graduate from Queen's College and taking this course for credit as well.
Great, thanks. I should note also that Jolene is leading a course that we're offering for the first time this semester, an associate course. People might be interested in it. Hasn't started or not far into it. So if there's anyone you know that might be interested in it, it's on the diaconate, past, present, and future. So it's a good course, one that we are kind of responding to a bit of requests from across the diocese for many people who are preparing for diaconate or who are ordained as deacons, but would like to kind of get a kind of a fuller and deeper sense of the place of diaconate in the church. And Jolene is the leader for that course. Kay, good to have you on.
Hi, Kay Short, priest in charge of the parishes of Bombay North and South in beautiful Bombay, Grossmoorn area, and graduated Queen's a couple of years ago, but found out I'm an addict and can't just seem to let go. So I'm working now on my master's in theology, and great to be here.
Great to have you, Kay. Welcome back. Neil.
Neil Killers, I'm just sitting in here listening to you all as the chaplain. I recognise some names from both sites. So,
great. Indeed, good to have you, Neil. And we have online a Neil too, but anyway, we'll be in a moment going on table, so we're glad that you've introduced yourself. I should mention Neil is a chaplain here at Queen's. You probably said that, I'm not sure. Neil Buffett.
Yeah, good morning. Neil down in Fortune. I'm the rector of the parish of Fortune Lamoline, regional dean of the Burin Peninsula, and I have an intern here with me this fall. So I guess I'm doing this to see if I'm going to be doing what I'm supposed to be doing with my intern. Looking forward to it. I graduated of Queen's a few years back, and I still keep in touch with Queen's with a few different courses, off and on. Spurred by my wife, I have to say.
Yeah, both Neil and his wife are faithful students, visitors to Queen's College and supporters of Queen's. Great to have you, Neil, and thanks for taking on the role of being a supervisor for one of our interns this semester. I should mention we have 7 interns out this semester from Queen's College, so it's a busy one in that regard, but wonderful experiences for all of them. We have 2 people at the next site, Paul Ranson and Kathy Lasky. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll ask you to do your introduction.
I'm Kathy Lasky. I'm from beyond in the Diocese of Fredericton, and in beautiful Fredericton right now. And I am a graduate of Queen's College.
Ah, yes, we're delighted to have you there.
And I'm Paul Ranson. I'm the rector of St. John the Evangelist Church here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, from away. And my first course with Queen's, very excited to be taking it.
Great, and we're glad to have you both. Glad to have you back with us, Kathy. And Paulette?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm the rector in the parish of Deer Lake. I'm in the Western Diocese, and I'm a graduate of Queen's, and like Kay, I'm also addicted, so always got to do a course.
Great to have you back with us, Paulette. And Ruby?
Hello.
Morning, Ruby.
I'm Ruby. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, I'm over on the West Coast as well, and I'm the priest in charge of the parish of Bay St. George and also Stephenville Crossing. And I've been given some new roles as regional dean and examining chaplain, so I'm hoping this course is really going to help me out. I'm originally from Nova Scotia, and I've been here for a year now.
Good. Great to have you. Let's go around this room. Well, actually, let's go back to Garvin first, because we weren't able to pick you up earlier, Garvin. Are you able to connect with us now?
Hello.
You there, Garvin? Okay, we're getting a bit of noise from there. You there, Garvin? We were just picking up a little bit of something or other a moment ago, and I expect it was yours, and none of the other mics are on. Anyway, we'll come back to you after we do the rounds of this room. Amanda.
I'm Amanda Taylor, and I'm the rector of the parish of St. Lawrence in Portugal Cove, and also the canon responsible for youth, children, and ministry vocations in the Diocese of Eastern Newfoundland and Labrador. And I graduated from Queen's 11 years ago.
Is it that long?
Wonderful
Wow.
to be back.
Yeah. Great. And wonderful to have you back indeed. Right. Bill?
I'm Bill Strong. I'm the rector of the parish of Portagrave. I also serve as the territorial archdeacon for the Archdeaconry of Trinity, Conception, Ascension. And I'm a graduate from Queens in 1998.
Wow. Time flies. Yeah. How old am I at all? How long have I been at this? A long, long time. I think I have 27 years or something now doing a bit of work at Queens, you know. Yeah, yeah. The only thing when I walk down the corridor where all the pictures are, I can see my hair. It seemed to me like it went overnight, but no, it didn't actually. It was about 3 years. Thought they were kind of critical in it. My son is 24, and he says, "Dad, how old were you when you lost your hair? Look at my hair. I'm almost bald." about your age, boy. Nancy?
Hi, I'm Nancy March. I'm the priest in charge of St. Mary the Virgin Parish here in St. John's, and I graduated from Queen's in 2009.
Glad to have you back too. Wonderful. Great. And welcome to you all. It's so good. We're so glad to have a group from Fredericton with us in this venture. And folks are always welcome to anything we're doing. If you want to come and spend time with us as well on campus, you're certainly welcome to do that. And if you have thoughts or ideas of ways that we might be able to support you in any way, then you certainly reach out to us there. And I just got a note that popped up to me, and I should mention the feature while I'm describing it, is that there is on your GoToMeeting menus a chat there that you can send a message to everyone, or you can send it to anyone. So there might be 2 or 3 who are on who need to connect with one another. You can do it that way. But if you happen to be sending a note to someone else to say something such as, "This is awful boring," and you happen to send it to everyone, we will all see it. So it's kind of like hitting reply all. But anyway, it's a convenient thing, particularly if you can hear us but we can't hear you, or there's some technical problem, such as a moment ago, I got the note saying Bob LeBlanc is actually Garvin. Okay, but anyway, we want to hear from Bob. Bob, you there now? Okay, for some reason or other, we're not getting Bob. Okay, but sounds like, Bob, you can send us a note if you. Okay, he says I'm here, and so maybe we'll just. Okay, great, Bob. We'll just ask Kathy if you just kind of, for the sake of us who haven't met Bob in person, just do a short introduction of him.
Sure. Bob is the rector out in the parish about an hour from Fredericton, and he's originally from Nova Scotia.
Aha, great, wonderful. Well, welcome to you all, and we're delighted to have you with us for the course. Now, we'll move into what we're going to do today, and I set the time from 9:30 to noon, but I will generally try and keep it to 2 hours. And that will include giving a little bit of time to dart along and grab a coffee, move around, freshen yourself up in whatever way you want, bathroom break and what have you. And we'll do that at, say, at about the halfway mark or so. So, here's what we're going to do today. Well, we're partly through. We've done the introductions. We'll take a quick look at the course syllabus, and then we're going to get into the overall topic of supervision, role of a supervisor, and goal setting. And in my mind, we have conflict management type themes to get into a little bit later. I'm going to take 2 major themes out of conflict management. We've had a course at Queen's College. The very first course I taught at Queen's College was a course on conflict management a long time ago. And so it's a full course. that we're actually now blending it into the overall parish administration course. It'll be offered after Christmas. But the two components that I want to focus on in this are really on giving constructive feedback, that is helping people to deal with problems or things that they need to work on, as well as positive recognition. Two things, they fit together and they are essential to supervision. We'll talk about that when we come to it. Doubt that we will actually get to that today, but anyway, we'll push off in that direction. So I want to take a moment first on to pull up, hopefully in a moment I'll be able to pull up my Word document and open up the syllabus. And probably see there, I actually have all this there to impress you, make you think that I have a lot of important stuff on the go. They're all blank documents except this one. And most of it's stuff I, copied off someone else's emails or something. But anyway, here's what we're going to do in the fall, gang. Short course description is there. And as I say, it provides clergy with information and skills to mentor individuals preparing for ordination by modeling pastoral practices, demonstrating congregational leadership, and offering spiritual guidance. Now, when I set out that course description, since then, I've had a bit of feedback from some people who are doing the course to say, it'd be worthwhile for us to broaden it to make sure that it's not only about ordained, but also for non-ordained supervision. And that's perfectly valid, and that's why I even included that in my bit of introductory stuff. The second thing that people have said is that, I find it just as hard to give supervision to people that are doing ministries and employees in the parish and what have you. So can we make sure that it kind of covers off generally some things about supervision or that kind of, I suppose, manager role or supervisor role that one has over others in any role that they might have within the church. So it's not as if all of the principles and what have you of doing any of this kind of stuff is absolutely unique to just people who are preparing people for ordination or even ministries within the church. It's also, a lot of it is equally applicable to other things. And so I think that I'll just make that little revision to the course description for next time, and just to say for next time we will offer, that is, but also to make mention that it's something that we'll be bearing in mind. And you weave it in as much as you want in your comments and examples. I really hope you'll bring some examples yourself, either from your own experience of being supervised, good experiences, as well as more challenging ones, and situations where you have been in where you've had to kind of try and figure out, how do I deal with this, and what's the best way to do it, and what have you. We have two models. I mentioned that before. I don't need to belabor this very much. We have the non-credit offerings, and it's pretty straightforward there. I'll be sending along the readings, and you will read them and participate in these sessions, and wring as much out of it as you want without the burdens of evaluation of through papers or those types of things. And then there are some who are doing the course for credit, and so there's a bit more detail and expectation and requirements and so on there, and those people have received that type of information and materials as well. I mentioned in my earlier introduction that the course, I suppose, to put it to a simple sentence of why did we decide to come about with this, is that we've had people out that we've been trying to put in place or get practicums in place for, and we're kind of surprised that so many clergy that we thought would be ideal to provide supervision to people in various types of programs, when we ask them, they'd say, I'm not sure I'm able to do that. I'm not sure that I'm good enough at what I do or have the skill set to be able to do it. And my observation on it is that for the vast majority, it isn't their competency to do it, it's the confidence to do it, because like with lots of things, we become teachers, and the only way we've discovered how to teach is how we were taught. and the same is true with so many other things in ministry, and so supervision is somewhat similar in that regard as well. Bit of stuff there on the requirements for each semester for those who were doing the credit course. For those who weren't doing it, at least you might know what you're missing out on. If you want to switch and do it for credit, you can do that. But if you want to sit back and grin and say, I don't need any more credit, so I'll wring what I want out of it without having to do written work, you're welcome to do that as well. One of the things that I might mention as well that we've done at Queen's that make doing credit courses a reason, because some of you are probably saying, well, why never go? These people do credit courses. We have some students at Queen's College who over the years did their Bachelor of Theology. They sat in the same classroom, did all the same work as people who got the MDiv degree, but they got their Bachelor of Theology because they didn't already have a bachelor's degree. A few years ago, when Dr. Alex Fazarek was here as a provost, he had the keen eye to see that, you know, these people have done most of the same studies, so why don't we backfill for them so that they can get a master's degree? And same is true in some other denominations, and so the faculty and corporation agreed to the establishment of a Bachelor of Theology program, and so it's 10 credits, 10 master's level courses, we might say. And what we found actually is that when people were doing their BTH and their MDiv, that they had a surplus of credits, and so we came into the program generally needing to only do another 7 courses. And some have done a few since they were ordained, and so they're well along towards getting the degree now. So that's kind of a little bit of background for those who aren't familiar with that arrangement. So the slide that I have up there now, or the page from the course syllabus that I have up, is on basically our outline. Some of you are having flashbacks and saying, boy, he hasn't changed in this regard. Because I'm one of these people that when I'm starting something, I want to know where we're going, how we're going to get there, and when we're going to get there. So I like to lay out courses with the detail of put a topic on each class, at least to keep it focused, and a bit of detail of what we're going to do in the class, and then move through it so that from the start we got an idea of where we're going to wind up. We're going to do it over 2 semesters, and so what we're going to do is fill in the dates with your input on convenient dates as we look at the winter semester. But that's to do a little bit later. So, any questions, comments, or observations about the setup of the course, the pace of it, and how we're doing it? As I mentioned before, we'll be doing it on recording it. You can attend here at Queen's if it's convenient for you, and online, or grab the recording. And you see there what I have up is what you've seen already. I don't need to waste time going over that stuff with you. Any questions, comments, or observations? Anything that's not there that you'd like to have in? Anyone you know that would be a great resource to come along and have a little chat with us about their experience and what have you? Anything like that, quite open to it. Anything from anyone? I'm sure you're all saying it and forgot to turn on your microphone, so thanks for the comments, but we didn't get to hear them. Okay, well, what we'll do now is back to our PowerPoint. So what we're going to do today now is move right into supervision. And one of the slides, or one of the quotes that I like to kind of set the pace with when I go out to parishes to do an in-service on an internship and what have you, is I'd like to use this passage from 2 Peter. His divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. Through these he has given us his very great and precious promises, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature and escape the corruption of the world caused by evil desires. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness, knowledge, and to knowledge, self-control, and to self-control, perseverance, and to perseverance, godliness, and to godliness, brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness, love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. I use that passage, and I want you to take particular attention from verse 5 to the end. Notice the qualities and the progression, the words that are used, and take a moment to ponder how in ministry, for ourselves, for others with whom we might be trying to provide some guidance and support, that these matters would be relevant. Give me a moment to ponder that, and I'm also going to ask you then if anyone would like to make a comment, and I would ask you to make a comment. Don't be shy, we'll get used to each other. Anyone want to make a comment on what that passage says to you?
Grace and confidence I require.
Great. Thanks, Bill. Ruby, I see your mic is on.
I think perseverance really stands out for me in that passage because, you know, a lot of it takes perseverance.
Oh, indeed. Indeed it does. Thanks for that, Ruby. Anyone else with a comment?
For me, Rick, is Paulette. I was just thinking about divine power that gives us life, everything we need for life, and that's so true, I find, in my life.
Yeah.
As I look at those verses, Rick, I think of many people over the years in my life and how they have demonstrated all those qualities and how effective their ministry, both lay and ordained, has been in blessing the lives of others.
Yeah. Oh, so true. And it's as time has changed, as we move along, especially all of you are in ministry, all of you have experience and have had experience observing colleagues as well. You see how splendid it is when those qualities are lived, and how unfortunate when, for some reason or other, people drift away from being able to sustain these qualities, or unfortunate even more so, if they're kind of allowed to go forward in a role where they lack the qualities and the traits. I mean, that's part of the discernment of the individual and the church. But we know that sometimes circumstances are such that sometimes people are nudged forward probably faster or further than they're equipped for. We'll see if there's one last comment before we move on. Thanks for those wonderful comments you've made, by the way.
For me, it's to keep you from being ineffective and unproductive. It's a reminder that even though we're in this course, I think, to look into the role of being a supervisor, that we need to be reminded that we also need that reassurance, that reminder of the things that we need to keep in check.
Yeah. Well, you know, this is all connected. I mean, this is ministry in itself, and what you were doing here is exactly doing for yourselves, for the church, what others what you will be doing with others in the supervisory role. Great. Someone else online had a comment. I know Robert had a comment on that God equips us for all, and thanks for that, Robert. We wish we could hear you, but the point is a good one, and thank you for putting it in there on our chat. Anyone else? Somebody meant to speak a few moments ago when Nancy was speaking as well.
I was just going to say, I think it's just humbling knowing that where we've all been, or where I've been anyway, along the way, at some point, we've all struggled with some of these things. And as we help other people do that, it's a great reminder that we've all been there too. And so we're kind of walking this together. It's not just we know better now. We can re-experience some of the pain and struggle that we've all been through.
Yeah, thanks. So let's push it along a little bit further. Why is supervision important for those preparing for ministry? And why is supervision important for those in ministry? I think we've already had a bit of discussion on that, so we don't need to belabor much more, but we'll throw it out if somebody has a particular comment, especially on the second one, because it's kind of a relevant question, isn't it? One of the things that some churches and denominations are struggling with is how to introduce a performance appraisal process for clergy. Neil, I know you were going to say something, and I want to.
The parochial system has always encouraged individuality, and supervision, I believe, is fundamentally important to ensure that as we're moving forward, we are doing so in a positive framework, and that we are not picking up negative things that are having an adverse effect to the very thing we're trying to promote. And performance appraisals are wonderful tools to be able to affirm what you're doing, and at the same time to show and demonstrate that there are ways through which we can improve more.
Yeah. Performance appraisal, and they don't have to be done by a superior. It's a peer review. Those types of things are part of it. Any other comments? Because it's that aspect, as you say, Neil, the parochial context, parish context is really draws on people, and I mean, in many cases, the whole assessment of people's readiness for ministry is about, are they able to go out and be a lone ranger? Right? People who are reliant on others are often seen to be, at deficit. Bill, were you going to say something?
Well, it's interesting. I'm kind of one of those who sometimes fear fight or flight in terms of supervision. For example, I'm a type 2 diabetic, and when I know my blood sugar is out of control, I just don't take it. I don't monitor it, because it adds too much stress to my daily being. I'll find some other way to, I'm happy to say that these days it's all good, but there's not. I've had lots of times, and I think the same holds true for fear of supervision, that you won't be able to address that you feel so deficient in your own abilities that you're not able to address it, and that's what hence you become the lone ranger, and that's when troubles begin. I think one of the big things that we need to be able to stress is opening ourselves up to the concept that yes, we can be supervised positively. That is a major piece in dealing with people, I think.
Right. Yeah, and thanks for that illustration, or that example of how you, in your case, I know many others do the same thing, but I mean, that's the instinct, isn't it, to avoid and to deny, especially things that are tender,
Yes.
you know, right? Those who are online, can you hear when we when we're having discussion in this room? Could you hear Bill a moment ago?
Yeah, we could. I could.
Okay, great, good, good. Thank you.
I just wanted to add my thoughts to this question. I always find that it's in ministry, there's a little bit of you're not really sure sometimes, do I work for them or do they work for me? We tend to separate ourselves in leadership roles as us and them in congregations, and particularly in volunteers, working in positions that are very valuable to our ministry. Certainly we wouldn't do our ministry without. So I think it's vital that we know how to work beside while still leading and guiding these people who have chosen to willingly work with us.
Oh yeah, thanks for that, Kay. So true. And just being able to, you know, adjust what it means to be a team player is a challenge for sure. And appreciate roles. And there's some things about teamwork itself that need to be better understood. Everyone kind of takes it for granted when we use the word team that it always means the same thing, but for sure it doesn't. You hear the little dings, that means that people are leaving, and 2 people had told me beforehand, a few people actually, that they had to step out a bit earlier to because of prearranged funerals. Well, prearranged funerals. Yes. Well, you know what I'm saying. Brent, I see your mic on. Did you want to make a comment or share a thought or idea?
I wanted to say, I remember when I was first starting in ministry, one of our bishops said the first 5 years of your ministry will greatly shape perhaps what it might be the next 25 years of your ministry. And I think when we look at clergy especially, we're really investing in them when we have good supervision. And I think too many times, you know, you see clergy, especially in our diocese, which has rural areas, and they get put out there, and sometimes we all get busy and we're not intentional with that supervision. And then as a result, we often see clergy that are discouraged or burnt out or frustrated or just feel very disconnected from everything. And yet I think when we do have good supervision, which we've been really working on, you know, I think when clergy are happy and healthy, all the fruits of that are incredible. So I mean, and supervision is a huge part of that. So that's why that's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, and it's so important. And you know, Brent, bringing your point really a bit further, all of that is just as true, and probably even more true when we have lay people taking on more significant leadership roles, and they haven't been, as most of you would have been, in a college that's a faith-based community, we might say, where there is likely experiences of discussion and trust and self-reflection and those types of things, and action reflection models and what have you. And so in many cases, people can be almost exploited when they're put forward in a ministry without the skill set, and more especially the supervision to ensure that, yeah, they might have the knowledge on something or an aptitude for it, but the refinement of how to do it pastorally is something that having somebody who has been doing it pastorally to guide them and what have you is important. Let's push on a little bit more. I don't mean to cut anyone off if you have thoughts or ideas, but there'll be lots of things to comment on. I call this a word wall. I'll use a few terms. You'll become familiar with them, and God, someday you'll notice yourself using the same term. You'll say, "Oh my God, don't tell me I'm starting to use words Rick Singleton uses, like chin wag." When I say chin wag, I mean we're going to discuss something. Sometimes I call it a buzz group to sound a little bit more sophisticated. And when we're trying to just put a few thoughts and ideas up that are kind of all over the place, word wall is the word, is a term that's kind of used for it in facilitating. And if we were in a room today, we'd have, you know, a chalkboard or a whiteboard or a flip chart or something, and we'd be collecting these words from you. But anyway, because we're trying to do it in a different mode and what have you, I anticipated the kind of words that you would probably say, that you would, that comes to mind when we're talking about supervision. The other thing about you using those words that I use is that you got to say them with a St. Mary's Bay accent. They just don't have the impact if you say chinwag, like Peter Mansbridge would say. Now you got to say chinwag. A buzz group. Anyway, word wall. Oh yeah, those words. Have a look at them and tell me, are there others that we would paste on the word wall that come to mind when we're talking about supervision for ministry?
I'd say trust. Is that there? No.
Okay, good point. Let me get in there and let's add words if you have them. Any other word come to mind?
Vulnerability.
Ah, yes.
Ego.
For God's sake, don't go using big words now that I can't spell and make me look as stunned as I am. But ego.
Rick.
Okay, someone online had a word?
I would say body. Whenever I think about supervision and working together with the community, it's always about the body of Christ, and no part is individual. It all works together.
Excellent point, James.
No part is superior.
Yeah.
Relationship.
Yeah. Any other?
I think the word care, caring for one another.
Care. Rob put on our chat, journeying. See how good it is to have the chat feature on this too. And Bob, we're waiting. We're looking forward to your mic so that we can hear your comments too. But we'll get that straightened up. But thanks for pitching in this way.
Strength.
Okay, what was the word? Kathy, I didn't get your word there.
Strength.
Strength?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else?
If I can be forgiven 2 words, common understanding.
Ah, yes. And I bet every one of you are thinking, hey, sometime now when I'm doing something, I'm going to use a word wall. Okay, any other thoughts on it? So let's just push on before we take the break. A lot of it is about reflecting on what one is doing. Sometimes it's called, those who've done CPA or SPM and those kinds of things are likely familiar with the action reflection model when you come together for, some call them IPR or group discussions, group sharing, whatever the case might be. But it's about reflecting on what you've been doing, sometimes picking a particular incident apart with a group or with a supervisor, but a lot of it is your own reflection as well. And so I just throw up a few questions there for you to ponder for a moment, and then we'll push on a little bit further before we take our break. When it comes to this one, what is reflection and how do you know when you were doing it? One of the things I would say, and I learned this from a person I was doing a little bit of work with one time when I was talking about reflection and self-reflection, examining what he's doing, and came back after a week or so. This is when I had a counseling practice in Eastern Health. He said, I was thinking what you were saying about reflection. He said, I don't reflect. When I sit down, he said, I used to think I was sitting down to reflect on things and ponder and meditate. He said, All I'm any good at is ruminating. Interesting word, and it was I appreciate his wisdom and his honesty, because I have to admit there are times in my own life when there are troubling things going on that, you know, I try to be silent with it and ponder it and what have you, but gosh, sometimes I'd come away from it like a tea bag in a cup of boiling water. I was after steeping in my anxiety more. But anyway, not everybody has that experience, hopefully, but some of us have it, at least sometimes. Probably most of us have it sometimes. So what is reflection? How do you know when you were doing it? Why is reflection and the practice of ministry considered to be valuable? Who might that reflection benefit? You might think, and some of you might make a comment, what is the most fruitful piece of reflection you have been party to, and what made it fruitful? We'll take comments from here or online.
I think it's being able to switch from being subjective to objective on a particular issue. When you're able to move from, you're able to move from the particular and we can find an overarching, a bigger purpose through the experience. That can come back to that experience, put it in better perspective.
Being able to switch from subjective to objective. Great way to say it, Bill. And it's that being able to stand back and set aside the personal feelings and the distress and what have you. Excellent point. Thanks, Bill. Any other comment on any of the questions or things that might have come to mind as I ramble through them?
I think it helps us to sort of realize things that we could have done different, and we can benefit from it as well as any other person that we may come in contact with in the future, and probably be a little more effective. And that's, of course, in our professional life and our personal life.
Thanks, Gloria. Thanks for sharing that. Bob says here, he sent it on the chat, being able to put the mirror in front of you. Yeah. Takes courage to do it sometimes, doesn't it? Yeah. I remember one time I was doing a retreat and it was led by a lady. She was about 82 or 83. She was a sister. And she was talking about some of those kinds of things and about, like how we see ourselves and being able to look at ourselves honestly and whatever we see to appreciate it. And she said, and every morning when I get up, she said, I look in the mirror and I say, Gertrude, you are beautiful, you are loved, you're a splendid person. And she said, then I put in my teeth and I wash my face and I brush my hair. So, right, as I am. Being able to look in the mirror. And sometimes that takes courage, doesn't it? Yeah. Any other comment on this one? We'll be doing a fair bit of kind of looking at the notion of reflection as we move on, so we won't belabor it much more. Just need to bring up the proper slideshow slides. Okay. Here's some of the things that generally would be said about the purpose and benefit of reflective practice. It allows time for responding rather than reacting. And it's an important distinction to make between things. I often use that working with people in counseling and what have you to emphasize that there is a difference. Something happens and what we do from that moment on, we can either react to it, which is usually, Bill mentioned the words earlier, the fight or flight kinds of things and all that type of stuff, or we can take time to ponder it. And that's where bringing in a practice of reflecting and pondering that makes the difference, that we're able to kind of in default go into pondering and reflecting rather than reacting. And that's when we're able to make a kind of more balanced response that's in our own interest and that of others. Goes deeper into things. Reflection generates questions. I suppose sometimes the questions go to the kinds of things that we know about development and maturity and spiritual development included, talked about by people like Kohlberg and Piaget and Fowler and those kinds of things, more or less to say, why do I do the things I do? And we have the courage to ask that question about ourselves, about the good things we do. Sometimes we tend not to do that. If we make our reflective practice, what we do alone and with others, only focusing on our deficits, no wonder the old fellow would tell me that he was only good at ruminating, but that becomes part of our practice as well, our habit. We'll talk about how those habits come about in a few minutes too. So it generates questions, builds self-awareness, invites perspectives of different others. It's when we are doing it with others, either as a kind of a guide, a supervisor, a spiritual director, all those kinds of things, or in groups. Back to Bill's point on it earlier when he was using the examples. It's both detail and the big picture. And a service to others. I do a workshop on balancing between the personal and professional sides of life, but one of the principles that I build into it, the first principle of 4 pillars that I say that I build that platform on, is that the first way to care for others is to care for yourself. So having practices of self-reflection, having a supervisor, a spiritual director, a guide of some sort, is not only about doing it for yourself. You're only doing it for yourself so that you can do what you're called to, blessed to do, and what have you. And so we need to be able to appreciate that as well. And it can be lifelong. It's part of who you are, especially when it's life-giving. You want to do more of it. So supervision has 2 major aspects to it. One is the reflective aspect that we've talked a little bit about, and the other is exploration. If you just slide, there's a picture I took the other day when I was in outer space, kind of. Outer space on the net. What is and is not implied by the notion of exploring. Take a moment to, in your mind, just ponder a little bit about what might I say as the difference between reflecting and exploring? What sorts of questions are exploratory questions? What dimensions of ministry and mission are there to explore? What are the benefits and limitations of seeing supervision as exploratory? We're going to take a break in just a moment. So I just want to kind of move on to kind of the last slide that I have about exploration. Some of the things we might say about an exploratory process is not leaping to answers, not having prematurely fixed the outcomes, or exploring to make sure we get where we want to go. Sometimes they're described in the decision-making processes as disguised solutions, or in problem solving. We decide beforehand what the fix is, and so we line up our reasoning to get there. In science and in medicine, you often hear the term used, evidence-based practice, but some cynically talk about, or evidence-based decisions, I should say, that decisions are based on the evidence that has been done through the research. But some, as I say, cynically describe it as decision-based decision-based evidence-making. they make their decision and then generate the evidence to line it up. Assuming if there are two of us, the supervisor and the supervisee, that there are things we don't yet know. And taking different perspectives, being able to look at things in different ways, and even imagine if I was doing this, that, or the other thing. Imagine if I was in another person's position looking at this issue. Imagine what it would be like 10 years from now. And the why and the how, as well as the what. Reviewing our findings, evaluating their usefulness for the future. When we take a short break, we're going to come back and we're going to take a few moments on the notion of accountability. Because that's an important aspect as well. And it's always an important thing to kind of bear in mind as we're informing ourselves about supervision, either to see that I might like to participate in something where someone would be a supervisor. Supervision is what we set this up on, is the supervision for ministry. But I think you can see now that some of the same concepts relate to other engagements such as spiritual direction and what have you, and it's going beyond just the preparation of students for ministry and what have you. So then it starts to relate to accountability, and that also brings in then terms of, but to what extent is this type of stuff confidential and private, and it's not that I have there's one definite answer and what have you on it, but these are matters that need to be considered, and setting out kind of an agreement, we might say, or ground rules or what have you for whatever type of engagement it is, to know what are the parameters and the boundaries related to it and what have you. But anyway, what we'll do now, if anyone has a comment that they want to share, you're welcome to do it. I'll stay here for a moment before I go to refresh my own coffee. But for those of you who are online, those who are in this room, if you want to kind of recess for about 5 minutes or so, you can. I'll just take a moment to see if there are any questions and comments before I do the stop recording and then start it up again. Any questions, comments that anyone wants to throw at me before we recess?
Any opportunity to be involved in supervision invariably it brings about a greater knowledge to the supervisor as it does to the one who is being supervised. There isn't a student I've had that hasn't taught me a great deal.
Oh yeah. As long as you're open to it.
Yeah.
As long as you're open to that being able to learn from. And not just be the teacher.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think that's the key. People have to be open to the concept that they can be supervised constructively. I mean, so much of the world's, what Trump was trying to do at the UN was trying to find a way to, communicate with someone in another with a different value system than what he would have. So how how do you do that?
How do you do it?
How do you get someone to be open? Right? That seems to be the magic nut.
So let's take a few minutes, and then we'll come back at it for about another 45 minutes or so. Okay, we'll get back at it. I suspect that most are back at their station now. Welcome back. We'll have a little bit of break. But what I wanted to, I know that there are a few people that probably aren't back now after the break because they had other things on the go, and we've restarted the recording, so we're on the go again. So any questions, comments, thoughts, insights that might have come up as you were on your break before we move on? Hello? Yeah, hearing someone, but okay, it's Gavin. I'm hearing you, but not loud.
Okay, I'll try to work on the volume.
Okay, didn't hear.
Volume.
Okay, yeah, some setting on your microphone must be a little bit of a problem there. Maybe your distance away from it or something, but if it's a typical neck mic or something.
No,
I can't hear you loud. I don't think others can either. Yeah, very muffled, yeah. Okay, let's just push on.
Cheers.
Just to continue on with a little bit of stuff, and this is the quote from the UK. Studies have demonstrated that one of the most effective safeguards within organizations or professional settings is to provide frequent, open, and supportive supervision of staff. And that's so true. And just look where the purpose of the study on serious matters, wasn't it? The risk of child sexual abuse by adults in institutions. Certainly not all issues and matters are related to that only, but it's I guess the point is that supervision is so important to helping people grow and mature and develop rather than falter, drift away, slow down and burn out and those types of things. And we know that we can use those terms to kind of give a general description. When people are in the decline in their ministry or drifting off, as I might call it, there are many who can be hurt by that, both the individual themselves, but in many cases, many others. We don't have to look beyond families, people in congregations, colleagues, broader church, and many times the broader community as well. Supervision is a means of grace. There's a couple of simple quotes. One by one of the Oxford theologians. God happens in an interweaving flow of relationships like those between the father and the son. You could say between mother and daughter or parents and children. Opened up and deepened by currents of the Spirit. Interweaving of flow of relationships. John Wesley said, surely there are works of mercy as well as works of piety, which are real means of grace. I just want to take a few moments on when we're talking about supervision for particularly those supervising, field supervisors, we might say, for those in training programs. Someone is there as a supervisor because they're an expert in the field, and their expertise is pastoral ministry, congregational ministry for most, although we have two of our interns this year. Neither of them are in ordination stream. 5 are in ordination stream, but the 2 who aren't, their placements, one is in the with ex-offenders in community chaplaincy ministry here in St. John's, and the other is in catechetical and outreach ministries in the diocese, in the archdiocese. Supervisors, when it's in training programs, are usually partners with the college. They're advisors on readiness to, in our case, and I suppose in many others, it would be to the college, but also to the denominational authorities, the bishops typically, but others as well, on the readiness of a person to move forward to the next level of mission and ministry. They're mentors and models on the culture, values, attitudes, core elements that go beyond the books and the classrooms. And that's what one of the things that internships provide people is the opportunity to go beyond what was in the books and in the classroom and in the college, and see it at play in the context of the lives of people who are not full-time students, or not studying theology, or not what we may say, in a full-time or at least a steady, constant and development and spiritual growth mode and context. They're doing it in the community, mixed in with the numerous other things of life, and that's part of what the pastor deals with and works with every day, and is able to mentor and model for the students. And an important part of supervision, and I don't think this is only to only when it's students of a program who are out doing their internships and so on, is helping a person to forge an identity. You know, sometimes that's what people lose after a time, is a sense of identity, who I am. Who am I as a person? What am I about? What inspires me? What are my values? And what am I courageous about? Those kinds of deeper questions that help them to be aware of themselves and their identity and what have you. It's particularly true, though, when we're talking about students who are in that transition point from probably having been in a different career or profession for years. That's the case with many these days. But also for people who their life has been really a student, grown up in a family, and in most cases certainly, and lived at home, probably lived in residence and apartments, but kind of a student mind, student mentality, and that blessing, part of which is naivety of youth. And then in their context of supervision, in their internships or practicums or what have you, they're there where they'll be seen by others as having a special role, being called to take on things. And it's one of the things most of our interns comment on, is that it took them a little while in their placement to kind of get used to people turning to them as a kind of an expert, or at least having a special role and function, and because they're known to be studying or having studied theology and what have you, that they have something to offer. So those are a few of the things that would say of what supervisors are. I want to take a moment too on what supervisors are not. And there is a point at which we'll make a further distinction between and see some overlap as well, particularly when one is trying to be a mentor or a guide or a support to a colleague. But when we're talking about a student in a formation program, then the supervisors are not overseers in the sense of, looking over the shoulder on every task. It's about being able to carry out the larger duties and readiness and suitability and what have you, but it's not there to kind of be punching the clock and being the foreman kind of thing. Although sometimes there might be a little bit of that needed as well. Usually when those kinds of things are a problem, it's more in the context of the suitability for ministry than it is simply getting tasks done, is what I'd like to focus on there. The supervisors are, in the context of people preparing for ministry through a program, supervisor shouldn't be a person's best friend. And we have a program here where we follow a format, as most places do, in how we set up the official internships for people who are completing the degree programs and what have you. And students are now asked, as we've revised the program, in January, before their internship, they complete a form, an application, where they list the kinds of things that they would want to do. And in some cases, they will name where they would like to go for their internship. And often it's a place where they think that they would be very cozy. And, that wouldn't work. It's very difficult. Your accommodation of a close friend, your role in the life of a close friend wouldn't work well as being the supervisor. Nor is one who's a supervisor the person's therapist. You might be able to help them, guide them to get help that they need, if it's seen that they need support and assistance with something, but certainly wouldn't be in that role. Nor should the supervisor be the person's spiritual direction, because there'd be such an overlap and such a tangle of about confidentiality and the forum of spiritual direction, that it would limit what one could actually then share with a bishop or the college or others on how the event went. But anyway, I want to throw it back to yourselves with your insights, thoughts, reflections, memories, and what have you, on what you'd have to say about what supervisors are and what they aren't.
I really liked your comment on establishing identity, and even if you've been in ministry or in a role in ministry for a time, we constantly need that validation, affirmation. I often tell the story of being so used to people meet you at the door saying, "Enjoyed your sermon," "Enjoyed your sermon," and we constantly would say, "Well, we want to say to them, well, what part did you like the best?" And for example, this past weekend, my sister rarely comes to church, but she was there on Sunday. And so I said to her, "Was that all right what I said today?" And she said, "Well, but your gift is that you're able to relate to people." And that's all I needed to hear, But I think we all need that kind of, because we are reflective and we always reflect on what we do, and we don't need that affirmation in little ways.
Very often we don't tend to see the good.
No.
Very often we tend to minimize what we do well,
Yes.
and instead of focus on what we don't do well, or we think we don't do well.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and it is. You do focus on. A part of that is that Neil mentioned it earlier. Neil had to go on to another appointment, but he mentioned, this parochial setting sets one up to work alone and what have you, and that's part of one of the risks of it. You feel the pressure of one criticism, and it clouds any amount of affirmation and what have you. Any comments from anyone online?
Hello, can you hear me now?
We're hearing you, Robert, but it is muffled, but want to hear you.
Okay, we'll work on the volume. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else would comment? Well, let's push on.
I have a comment about the spiritual directing.
Yeah.
That's all right. I just this past summer I had the opportunity to do to have a summer intern with a government grant, and while the spiritual direction couldn't happen, I was also his spiritual director before he came to work with us. There was a spiritual directing component to it. This young man is discerning whether or not to be going into the ministry full time as an ordained priest, and we had many times of direction that I wouldn't say were actual like Ignatian sessions where we were directing when I was directing him, but there, as a supervisor, there was a component of directing in spiritual practices, making sure that there was a regular rhythm of prayer and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and actually it's an interesting aspect to it. Thanks for that comment, because it is important that the person recognize that there's some measure of monitoring of those things, and you're looking at a person forging that identity type of thing, and part of the identity needs to be that a person is a person of prayer, and not in a kind of the way that Pharisees would be criticized for it, but should be seen in our actions. Thanks for that. Excellent example. And in every context, it's getting the right balance on all of those things. There are inevitable differences too. Here I'm saying between a supervisor and intern, but I suppose we might say between any two people at any level. Knowledge, skill, experience, goals, interests, theoretical orientations, religious personal beliefs, and theological worldviews. My main point there is that supervision isn't, or at least it shouldn't be, if it's done half well at all, shouldn't be about trying to create a mini-me, trying to create somebody that'll be, exactly like yourself. This quote by Evelyn and James Whitehead in their book, Seasons of Strength, New Visions of Adult Christian Maturity. A Christian vocation is a gradual revelation of me to myself by God. This God reveals us gradually to ourselves. In this vision, a vocation is not some external role visited upon us. It is our own religious identity. It is who we are trying to happen. I'll just throw it open for a bit of chinwag now if anyone has a thought or an idea. Anything in that, or anything come to mind from reading that quote?
I think it's the open-endedness. It's not. It's the gradual revelation, but not to an end point.
Mm-hmm.
It's a consistent having to be revealed about.
Mm-hmm.
It's an ongoing process, not just for supervisee, but for the supervisor as well, to not be so
excellent point, yeah,
so blocked in that you're afraid to be open to what God is trying to reveal, and even in just that relationship.
Yeah, it is who we are trying to happen. Anyone online with a comment?
I think that it's not just people in clergy roles or anything like that. A Christian vocation is anything that you do in service of God, whenever you're fulfilling God's will and what your purpose in life is. And we discover that as we grow, as we throughout our entire lives. It's never the same. It's always changing. It's always growing. It's always adapting to what the Spirit reveals to us as time goes on.
Yeah, thanks, James.
And be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And being okay with that.
And being okay with that, yeah. Of course, one of the advantages is that in that discernment process of one's vocation, the ongoing, there's lifelong. It doesn't come to an end when one is ordained and what have you. But is that having others to help us and assist us in other ways, supervisors in the context we're talking about, but spiritual directors or what have you, is so important to it, isn't it? Let's look at just a couple of other quotes. We'll move through them fairly fast, but I think they speak to us on the matter. This is from Mother Teresa. Should many people mistake our work for our vocation? Our vocation is the love of Jesus. One of the things we always need to be a bit aware of, and at least we try to have a balance on it here in our setting up of programs, what have you, at Queen's, is that not just to give people skill sets and kind of training in the trade of doing pastoral care, but to have a deeper rootedness in what pastoral care is all about. And at the beginning and the end, it has to be the love of Jesus. That is the root of one's vocation. And when all else is said and done, it will be what you will have done. Implicitly and explicitly, it's the love of Jesus. Anyone have a comment? James, I see you have your mic on. I'm not sure if it's to make a comment or just before.
No, I've just forgot to turn it off.
Okay, no problem. I like to use this quote. I use it often. It's from William James. Many of you have probably heard of William James. He was well known, late 19th, early 20th century. He was a philosopher. He was a psychologist and a physician. So he had lots of perspectives, did lots of reflection too, and exploration. But most of his kind of interest was trying to get a sense of, think of it, the mind of a man who was a philosopher and a well-known philosopher and a psychologist and a physician. So he's dealings with people and he's pondering on why are people the way they are and how do people change and what brings about change. So he had a quote, I put it there kind of in short sentences, but his quote is, you sow a thought and you reap an action. You sow an action, you reap a habit. You sow a habit, you reap a character. You sow a character, you reap a destiny. In some ways, he kind of helped us to kind of peel back at least a layer or so on the mystery of who and what we are ourselves, and how we live out that love of Jesus and being in the image and likeness of God and what have you. Like, where and how does it come about that you or I or any of us would do the things that we do? And if there are deficits or if there are strengths, how do we account for them, particularly if we see a need to change? And particularly if we're involved with something such as supervision, receiving or giving, that it's about making adjustments for the future, moving towards a destiny. William James, reference to destiny is not only about life after death and the eternal destiny, but also about how things will be for us in this life, in this world. And so the progression is pretty solid when you think about it. And actually, it really, I think, speaks to people in pastoral ministry. You sow a thought. I mean, so much of what you do in pastoral care, in counseling people, pastoral support, spiritual support, particularly in preaching and teaching ministries, is about sowing thoughts. And thoughts that will lead someone to do something. But the encouragement of living a Christian way of life, where doing something not only once, but making it into a habit, so that it becomes your character, that spontaneously we do some things and we avoid doing other things. That's how formation takes place. And then it becomes no mystery in terms of how content, how supportive, how outgoing and outgiving we are as Christian people. That flow, William James would remind us, is as true about negative as it is about positive. The negative things just don't fall out of the sky most times. There's a bit of a reason why they come about. I mean, there are things that happen to us, certainly, that are completely circumstantial, but there are things, most things, major things, like we pitch in with our own decision making to some extent. Again, just want to take a moment to see if you have any comments, thoughts, or ideas on that one. I should mention, folks, I'll after class today, I will send you the PowerPoint deck that has the slides that we use today, in case you want to have a quick glimpse through them without needing to go through the recording. For those who weren't here or who need to, as part of it, they'll be able to skip through to about where they left and pick it up that way. But I'll send the slides so that you'll have that. I sent a reading a little while ago, and it was kind of interesting. Well, very, by Kenneth Poley, The Purpose and Function of Supervision and Ministry. So I want to just hear your thoughts and comments on that. Those who are doing it for credit have sent me some feedback in their reflections, but others might have thoughts and ideas as well. What do you think of it? Anyone want to come to a particular highlight or insight?
I really appreciated the theological context of the what he proposes, and especially around the issue of covenants and how important they are.
Yeah.
And I know I know in our context, we actually have one student. Bob is the supervisor for one of our students, and they have done up a covenant, and that's going to be the guiding document for the relationship.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that, Kathy. Anyone else, any comment about any insight you might have gotten, and you know, I suppose the case to be made for supervision in pastoral context?
One of the things I appreciated in the document on page 4, I mean, a lot of it I'd kind of, you know, I thought of before, but the idea of trust, and that there's maybe in our churches and our culture, there's a crisis in trust. And so one of the great things about supervision is to allow that relationship of trust. And I think when you have that, that's when I think real growth and honest reflection can happen. So that made me pause and really think about that. So I found that helpful.
And that experience of trust is so important, isn't it? Thanks for mentioning that, Brent.
I think the points gave us a lot to ponder of all the positive outcomes for supervision, and sort of takes away fear of that some people might have in relationship to supervision. It was very encouraging, I thought.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm just scrolling through it so that it might jog your memories, different sections and so on.
One of the things I found was difficulty following how he was looking at supervision, because sometimes I was thinking of it in terms of being a priest and leading the church and stuff, or other times, as you say, leading interns, or else just, you know, leading the lay. And I think what happens so often today is that we're so desperate, especially out in the rural areas, for volunteers for anything, and our congregations are senior and they don't want to do anything, that to go to them and say, you know, this should be the way we're doing this, or whatever, or think about it, you get the, well, I won't do it. I'm not going to do it. So we're walking on eggshells with our supervision of people. And just about the covenant, before I became a stipend priest, I was a non-stipend Nova Scotia, and of course, you know, we have covenants with our rectors there, and also with the churches. And I found that we sat down for hours and did covenants, and then they were read in church and never looked at again until maybe the next year, if they were at all. And covenant is important for finding out, you know, where I'm going with this, but it's no use if it's not observed by both parties or all parties. Just some thoughts.
Oh yeah, indeed. Yeah, yeah. And thank you for mentioning that. And it is, of course, typical. And you know, I mean, you hear people in not only in church situation, people working in other organizations that have contracts or job descriptions and those kinds of things, and to drift away from it. And a drift away from it is usually hand in hand with the amount of supervision that's provided and accountability. We mentioned that word before. You know, that if it's not done, well, then it becomes, you know, will you do what needs to be done right now? Falls away from there being some, you know, vision and mission and kind of the larger plans. And as I say that, you know, I think it's also important to say sometimes it. You don't want to talk about visions and missions and so on as if they're written once and for all and forever. I mean, there has to be mechanisms to be able to revise as needed as well if things are, and always things are changing somewhat. So the need for revision is part of it.
We've always struggled between the relationship between covenant and practice.
Yeah. Anything else before we move on, or any general comment on that type of article as a read for this venture?
From my perspective, a building of respect, trust, and openness, learning from each other as you journey. Because I find personally in ministry for a while, sometimes you get complacent and the newer ideas that are coming around you don't know about. But when someone's coming in with a different perspective, pursuing ministry, you I guess chat and you compare where you've been, where the other person has been, and how the journey goes forward.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's very much a mutual relationship, isn't it? That's why people need to be well matched. Anything else then before we wrap it up? Lots in the article. It's loaded, as we might say. And in Newfoundland, when you say loaded, it usually isn't about literature and peer-reviewed journals. But anyway, enough about that. So I'm just going to close that one now and bring us into the next slide. And so in the context now of the article, let's just see if anyone wants any comment. The same slide as I had a few moments ago, but I just bring us back to it. Having looked at the article by Polly, and then what does that say about the process, we might say, that William James kind of tosses towards us? Might go back as well just to kind of jog your memory on how all this stuff is kind of connecting to the word wall. Having read Polly's article, and we plastered a few words around others as well, you know, a lot of us there, isn't it? Which really, to me, reminds me what I've said that this course is largely about giving people the confidence to do their competency. You know, all of those things. Polly didn't say anything that, for the most part, we can't pull out of ourselves. But hopefully, by doing this kind of stuff, we validate that. You know what, my insights are very spot on and what have you. And so would your insights in sharing your expertise with others as a supervisee.
It seems to me that very often when you're doing any kind of exercises, the question that I often ask is, where do we want to be at the end of this process, or the end of, as politicians would say, where do you want to be at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Spade is a shovel. Yeah. You know, but that objective needs to be constantly reevaluated and examined. You know, like, because it's so easy to fall into those traits which you listed that supervision is not.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, so that is so that constantly is an evolving thing.
So the just want to push with a few more slides. We're going to be finishing in a few moments. Obviously, I didn't get to cover everything that I had in mind, but we're after doing all right with it. Aspects of supervision in the context of ministry. So, kind of three major, from a bit of stuff that I've pulled together out of books that I've looked at and some articles and so on, three major functions. One, to support the minister in their vocation and practice and its development. The minister might be a student, the minister might be whatever, but it is in a pastoral context. To safeguard the interests of those amongst whom ministry is practiced, including those of children and vulnerable adults. And to ensure that the ministry offered in the name of the church is collegially and accountably reflected upon in the light of God's mission and the ministry of the church. Community, a word was used, and we put it up there on our word wall, didn't we? So a way of kind of looking at the supervision in context of ministry, to kind of say that there are kind of three pillars generally. So this is not just about people who are in programs at Queen's College or anywhere else as far as that goes. Overall, in the context of ministry, what are the pillars? Well, one, we might call it the normative one, where shared theological reflection on the practices and vocation of ministry within the horizons of God's mission and within the churches, whether it's a diocese or college or denomination, code of conduct. So there are norms laid out. There are things that are said how things should be done in a ministerial role. They're usually reflected in contracts and covenants and learning goals and those kinds of things. It's the shared identification of risks to self and others and the identification of steps to reduce and manage those risks. So those are normative things, that there are standards and goals and things put in place, to help one get into the culture, we might say, and the accountability and what have you of ministry. But then there's also the formative one, to support the lifelong learning, the formation, development in ministry through shared reflection and the exploration of creative approaches to demanding issues of ministry and relationships as they arise. So it's the student or the person new to ministry or the person who's a veteran in ministry but now is for some reason or other becoming aware of, there are things that I haven't touched in before. I've never been one to visit long-term care centers. Since I was ordained, I spent a lot of time doing this, that, and the other thing. And now, over half the people in my congregation are elderly. They don't get out to church the way they used to be. Or people don't go to church, so does it mean I don't have a ministry to them and what have you? People are very mobile and what have you. And so, do I provide grief and bereavement services only to people in the parish where there's a funeral? Or I have people who leave this urban centre and go home to rural places here and beyond. What ministry do I have to those? So learning new ways and what have you. It's all part of the formative stuff, isn't it? And restorative. Ensuring that the vocation and the work of the supervisee is shared, valued and nurtured. Ensuring that the health and well-being issues of supervisees are addressed. And this is particularly the case if a person has self-identified or been designated by someone else as needing some help and supervision and guidance and growth. Then that restorative aspect, it's such a Christian thing to do. A justice issue, really, especially in the church, if it's someone who has had a lifetime in ministry and for whatever reason is not ministering the way that they are needed to or ought to be, that there are things in place to help them to kind of get along with it and restoration. Folks, we're just about at wrap-up time. I'm just going to ask if there's any comments on the last few thoughts that we've been into. We'll pick up on this stuff for next time and then move into some of the conflict management stuff. I'll just kind of give you a glimpse at the headings that we'll be doing, touching on next time and what have you, but we won't need as much time to get ourselves into things, and then we'll get into our topics on constructive feedback and recognizing results. We'll try and move at a pace that'll cover it off adequately. But any comment before we wrap up? And I'll ask you, if you will, please, to comment on maybe two things. One is what we've done, any reflections that you have on it. And the second thing, is it clear in terms of the audio and the video, the technology, and what have you? In other words, anything you want to kind of suggest that we do a bit different and what have you? I think I have a last slide here that asks for a bit of that type of feedback. So forgive me as I'm flicking through really fast. Any comments?
Hi, it's Ruby here.
Ruby, yeah.
When the folks in the classroom are speaking with you, they're not very loud on my computer. Is anybody else finding that?
Okay, am I loud enough?
Yes, you're coming loud and clear, but the rest of them kind of die out and hard to hear.
Okay, so the microphone. Pardon me?
There have been a few people I've had a hard time picking out. I'm not sure if they're the people in the classroom or people online, because I can't tell, but.
Okay, well, there's actually two things that come to my mind on that then. One is that we need to, I can see what the problem is. Someone changed the setting on the microphone here so that it's not picking up everything around. But the other thing that I wanted to mention is that perhaps for the future, identify, like I can see here, but I don't always mention the name of the person speaking. I can see it on my screen. So if it's Bill Strong here, say it's Bill here, and here's what I think, or if it's Brent or whomever. So thanks for that, because it makes it a bit frustrating if you can't hear and then you're trying to pick up discussion, especially if it's here in the room and I'm hearing what the person is saying and then I'm making comments on it and what have you. So thanks for that suggestion. Anything else from anyone? Okay, so we tried to stay on schedule. Just a minute or two over now. Actually, we said we'd be here till noon, but I said we'd try and finish by 11:30. Does that work well for people? Do you think that, you know, keeping the break short and starting on time and working towards 11:30, maybe a little bit over, but certainly no more than 5 minutes over, would that be what most would kind of prefer?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Absolutely.
Sounds good to me too.
I know I'd get responses on that one. Always do. Do you find that it's always a bit of a challenge, or at least I've always found it a bit of a challenge when you're doing a class where you have people in the room and people online, trying to make sure that there's some adequate engagement, especially from the people online. I have to say that I didn't find it that way today. I appreciate your comments about have you. I think it's not so much a reflection of me. You're supposed to say, oh, yes, it is. You're really good at this. But anyway, you don't need to say it because I think that anyway. But what I want to say is that, I mean, it's a topic that you folks have knowledge and experience of. And so your pitching in is really appreciated. But I want to know, is there anything else that we can do to, you know, make it a good experience, something that you won't be dreading on the 4th of October, but at least finding it as good as anything else should be doing that day, and maybe better than some of the other things. Any comments? Or
having done courses in this format for a couple of years now, I do find that the changes in the technology at Queen's makes it much better and user friendly for those of us who are visiting online.
Yeah.
I feel more included and the opportunity is there. And even being able to see the room and who's in the room, even that little thing makes a difference. And
yeah.
So the changes are certainly great.
Yeah, and actually now there's a setting that I'm trying to see if I can get it activated so that when someone speaks that that their webcam will come on. But I'm not sure if it works. It's very reliant on the capacity of people's own computers. But anyway, if that's available, we'll try and use it as well for those who would be willing to do that. Anyway, anything else before we wrap up? Well, thanks, folks, for having the interest in it. But more so, thanks for the interest in supervision, because it is really an essential ministry in the church. And as the source of vocations, we might say, the profile of vocations is changing to people who are older, people who are more distributed, and availing of distant learning models, it becomes crucial that there are people distributed also who can be cheek to jowl to sit and have a chinwag with people as they are in their field placements, and also that there are some who feel more confidence in being able to be a spiritual guide for others. And so that's part of what we're building into it as well, is a bit of a component on a spiritual direction and what have you. And so stay tuned. I will have the recording up within a day or so, and also we'll have I'll send the slides of what we've covered off today along to you. Until then, I'll be missing you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
That's cute.